For part two, with Mauricio from Magment, we're looking at applications of charging concrete in the built
Correct.
environment. So we've covered in part one sort of how concrete can be used to charge vehicles. And now we're going to look at applications. Um, I believe, if I'm not wrong, there's sort of three main types. So warehouse applications, which we sort of touched on, roads and docks. I'm guessing from what you said in part one, warehouses are the big driver at the moment in terms of uh, yeah, number of vehicles that are suited to it in that environment. Are there other? Well, I suppose what do you see as the future potentially of application?
Yeah. Okay. Of course, I try to draw a picture so that we see this. And I mean, as debatable as it may be, mobility is getting decarbonized and electric more and more and more. I mean, you may find still some exceptions being still on combustion or on hydrogen, but those are going to be the exceptions. So it's quite clear that the mobility is going into this direction. So the applications we see here is because all around our technology is about transmission of energy. So we need to think a bit at or let's say we need to see a larger picture. It's not just this wireless charging, which would be the or will become certainly the preferred way to charge vehicles. And our conviction about this is coming from the fact that everything at the end of the day becomes wireless. I mean, if you take a normal phone like this one, it's wireless. Our mobile phones are wireless. Our computers are wireless. Everything, it's a normal trend in industry and in applications to go this way. So, but because that doesn't happen overnight, we need to go in steps, showing the benefits. Because when you see especially wireless charging in motion, is the type of charging where people just don't notice that they are charging. They're just driving. They're just moving goods. They are moving people, whatever. Kind of think of the bus, for example. It's a very good case for wireless charging. And then the charging happens either while taking the example of the bus, while the bus is moving, or even when the bus is stopping at the bus stop just to get and let passengers. And during this time, this half a minute or whatever time, it can charge, right? So those are the things that we envision as a way to transmit or even to distribute power through this wireless charge. And interesting enough, and let me mention this as a very new and special type of application we are developing currently, which is also uh, transformers. Because you need to think about when you generate these days electricity more and more on a renewable way, take wind energy. So you need to bring this wind energy with high voltage transmission lines. You need to bring them to the urban centers, and you need to transform it down to lower and lower voltages. Right? That's how it's being done. So you need transformers all that way. And our technology is also fantastic for transformers. In other words, we are not linked exclusively to charging vehicles wirelessly. We also are part of the infrastructure of the grids to bring the energy to the vehicles or to the homes or to whatever. And I think at the end of the day, with this broader picture of applications, what we see is our world is becoming more and more electric. Even heating is becoming electric. Everything is less and less combustion and more electric. So the function of our magnetic materials is to support this growth of electrification of our world in a sense. So we are happy to be part of this, given the fact that these very affordable materials, very easy to manufacture. You can get all these raw materials, all these recycled raw materials all around the world. There's no limitations to that. So that we can, with this technology, which is going back to the very uh, easy way of making a concrete, but now with a magnetic and electric function. So that's where we see that our application base will naturally grow into these different directions I just explained before.
Definitely. And from the well, I read that you've obviously done some trials so far. Are there sort of interesting results that have come out of those so far in terms of because I believe you're sort of doing an Indiana trial, for example, or others. Are there better results than you expected in terms of how it's been implemented in different situations?
Well, I'm not sure I got your question here, but um, I mean it's within all this transition we are all experiencing, right? Within this, there is a lot of different ways also to, for example, generate energy, and but still you need to transmit it and distribute it, right? So I think that's kind of the thought that we need to have. It's not just thinking about I don't know what you have in the North Sea as say offshore wind energy generation. You also have photovoltaic on your roof on your home, right? And so everything needs to at the end of the day be brought to the devices, which are quite different ones, but more and more also the cars themselves or the devices, whatever those are, that need to be fed with power. So I don't know if your question was pointing into this direction, but it's really the basic idea of you need to bring energy to different devices to be able to fulfill certain functions. And
Yeah,
let me stress this: charging is not a goal in itself. Charging is a condition. If you cannot charge your phone, you cannot use it, right?
yeah,
If you
yeah, yeah.
can't charge a computer, you cannot use it. So what we are trying to solve is how things are being charged and how the energy gets there in a nutshell.
Interesting. I suppose from the work you've been doing, are there limitations to this technology in terms of when it can be applied,
Oh,
um,
yeah.
or is it quite got quite a wide number of uses?
I would say there's two sorts of limitations, if you wish, and there are some, of course. One kind would be the more technical type of limitations. I would say currently one could be a certain amount of power. That I mean there is a limitation, but it's not a principle or a limitation of principle. It's a limitation maybe of size or of cost. So that's the technical side. The other limitations may be much more about the commercial adoption of the solutions. And this is an interesting question because quite often we are engaged in discussions where people are concerned about the first type of limitations and they learn, oh, but those limitations are very little. Like, for example, one classical question we are asked often is, how about health concerns? Are there emissions, radiation, that could be a hazard to people, to human beings, sorry, to living beings like animals, whatever. So that means the answer is no. It's a very well controlled type of transmission. There's even in some systems, it's mandatory to have sensors to detect the presence of living objects, as they are called. And that would yield, if they would be too close to the magnetic fields, they would yield a shut off of the system. So those things are really well under control. So that's not a limitation. But having said that, when it comes then more to understanding, or where does it make sense in commercial or economical terms. So I would say that the limitation there could be just the building up of the infrastructure. In other words, as you can imagine these days, you are seeing a lot of cable or plug-in charging stations being deployed all around the world. Like here in Germany, you can say it's like two charging stations a day, constantly. So if you would say, well, wireless charging is more convenient, wireless charging is even better in many respects. How could you change this running deployment of cable charging stations? So that's kind of a challenge to convince the responsible actors, which can be governments, can be even municipalities, can be industrial companies, to change their model to say, no, okay, we'll stop this normal way of charging and go to the next one. So the only way to get to this point is, of course, by keep demonstrating, keep showing the benefits, doing the benchmarks, these kind of things. But I would call this limitation a natural market limitation. Markets are not very permeable to innovations. I would regard markets even as quite conservative sometimes. But whenever things are getting so clear and so convincing, then the adoption comes possibly all of a sudden. Like everybody's, for
Yeah,
example, 50 years ago, who would think that you would have internet in your pocket?
yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
Today, everybody has. When did it happen? Nobody knows. It happened. And
yeah.
you
It's just
know,
accelerated. Yeah,
we'll see at some point. We'll see something similar to that too.
yeah. I think it's going to be interesting to see how things change, because you're right. What you mentioned in part one is the adoption or the commercial limitation is how many vehicles, for example, would benefit from it. So in a warehouse, most vehicles are electric, therefore, great adoption idea. At the moment, cars obviously not as many, but I can see in the future as that transitions, um, that potentially supermarket car parks or office car parks all have these in each of the spaces, so cars can charge while they're sat there. Um, but and one will influence the other at the same time, because obviously the benefit, as you say, of having this self-charging is that cars don't need such big batteries. They become cheaper as a result, therefore easier to adopt. So there's kind of different factors hand in hand that will help different areas accelerate at different rates, and therefore what becomes commercially interesting or viable for the adoption of it. So it's really interesting as a material and a
And you know
possibility.
something, if you think about this, the biggest challenge to us is to find the right places, the right regions in the world where we believe that let's say the interest and the access uh, is better, and I mean, you could say, like, there are places like maybe the US, or maybe even China, or maybe even the Emirates, or I'm just mentioning kind of like the conventional thinking about possibly less in Central Europe, or maybe less in the UK, or but our experience is not like this. So we have learned that it's a matter of keeping, of course, a high level of communication with different actors, and we often find conditions in places where you wouldn't expect this to happen. You know, Let me tell you two examples which show how that is. We have found, for example, a lot of interest and a lot of eagerness to adopt our technology in Spain. You wouldn't regard Spain as the first place you would like to go, but it happened there. So that's why we're very eager working in that market. And and another market where things are starting to move for buses, we found a very interesting place in South America because there is a lot of electric buses in South America. I know that also right now the adoption of electric vehicles in London, for example, is very huge as well. But South America is even larger. So the issues there is the cost of the battery and the weight of the battery is a huge problem because in some cases the weight could be so high if you need to charge those vehicles like overnight. You need big batteries, and those weights could become an issue for the load bearing capacity of the roads. So that they would not be even allowed to be used uh, passing a certain value because it could just destroy the the roads, right? So that's where wireless charging is being considered in many cities that are starting to look into not only adoption of electric buses, but adoption of electric buses with certain characteristics. And so we have found there a nice access for our technology.
Yeah, I suppose the other key thing is because it's not the vehicle has to constantly. It's not like a Scalextric's car where it has to be constantly in contact with electricity. You don't have to have the entire network fully covered. You only need sort of key areas where it's installed.
Absolutely.
So yeah,
That's
yeah,
enough in like the most or the areas of the warehouse where most of the traffic is. It's like the hot areas where all the vehicles go back and forth, and only a few go into aisles or into you know remote areas within the warehouse. So that's an easy task to find those areas, and you want to have that infrastructure only there because that reduces the cost of installation.
perfect. But my final question, I think, then before we finish, is around that cost part. What does it currently look like in terms of cost? I don't know, maybe per meter. I don't know what's a
That's a
good
very
way
good
of measuring it,
question.
but
Yeah,
yeah,
and I'm happy to answer that because quite often people don't have any idea. I mean, how much could that be, right? So we have figured out in a warehouse, with the right amount of power. So, for example, such a vehicle needs to be charged at around 10 kilowatts to have a number. So if you would install here, we would do this for around 2,500 euros per installed meter. So that's the cost of the full installation. If it's, of course, a greenfield building, it's cheaper than that. If it's an existing building, when you need to have also the cutting out of the floor as part of the installation, then that's the value I just gave. So that means, with that in mind, if you take, for example, 20,000 square meter building, and you say, well, we need to do like 200 meters, which is about 1%. So the cost of this would be about 500,000 euros. Okay, but then you can, in order to make the return on investment, you can say, well, but you are saving about a quarter of the fleet. So you don't need any more 100 vehicles, you need only 75 vehicles because they are not standing around charging. And then you take off half of the batteries. And then you eliminate also all the manpower, the manual handling of charging. So doing all this, we've done in a very detailed way. I'm just trying to explain it. You
yeah, I
come
can
up
imagine.
with savings that justify the investment, and we see return on investment for that capex that could go all the way to about 2.5 to 3 years. Okay. However, given the way that our world works these days, we are also looking into leasing, renting models. We have other ways offering this, so that some operations would like to have this more as an opex rather than a capex. Those are the things that we're working right now, but we are already in the middle of commercialization, justification, return on investment, productivity. That's where the technology allows you to go this far. Right?
Yeah, yeah. I think it's fascinating. I think it's an interesting one, particularly for surveyors to watch in terms of how that's going to change the built environment, how that affects valuations of properties and use cases and all that type of stuff. So, but in terms of use day to day by firms, it's very interesting to see how that gets adopted. As you say, more and more warehouses have robots now, and as well as forklifts and so on. So, yeah, big opportunity. Thank you very much for coming on today.
My
If
pleasure.
anyone wants to, if anyone wants to get in touch to learn more about your product or your service, how do they get in touch?
Yes, thanks very much for that. So the best would be whoever is interested, just email us at info@magment.co. Okay, that's our email address. Happy to receiving all inquiries, all questions, even, and I just want to mention that if somebody feels like he would like to invest in our company, more than happy to discuss that. We have a lot of investment ways. We have doing crowdfunding, we have doing equity funding, we are doing also business angels funding, different things, because people feel very attracted to this technology and often are interested to participate. But also customers, of course, interested users, even developers of projects, construction companies. So everybody welcome to contact us. And last but not least, we're in Munich, and if somebody happens to be here in a month from now, which is Oktoberfest,
Yes.
Don't hesitate and pay us a visit here. We're very close to downtown Munich. So if somebody wants to come here and look at what we do, everybody welcome to pass by and looking at how we do things, how things work. So our pleasure hosting you here.
Well, that'd be a fantastic invite.
Okay.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for coming on, and look forward to catching up soon.
My pleasure. Thank you.